Hello, I am your everyday average Jonathan. Join me this week as I turn this and this into this, what is called a Quillon Dagger. Hello, I am your everyday average Jonathan. They say that all things must come to an end, and sometimes those things might be good, and sometimes those things may not be so good. What is your everyday average Jonathan getting at, you might ask? Well, in this particular instance, there has been a good thing, which has been these projects that I've been doing. A good thing for me, at least, to show the world projects, whimsical ideas, expressions of mine. Over the past year, I've done quite a few projects, but also over the past few years, it should be known that I have been trying to sell the ranch that I live on. I've put it on the market several times. I've gotten a few offers in the past. I didn't accept them. And to that note too, where I live is very, very high up in altitude. It's a little over 8,000 feet. It's far outside of town. It's far outside civilization for myself and for my daughters. And so it has been a long time in coming, but finally this ranch is sold. I have a buyer. I don't want to jinx anything, so fingers crossed. We're still in the contract phase. And sometime between now and the next 45 days, I will be in a new home. It has been an amazing time to raise two girls up in nature, similar to where I grew up in the mountains of California. But having two young girls and the distance to everything else in life, being so isolated, has definitely taken its toll. So that said, what does that mean for your everyday average Jonathan? Sadly, it means that for the foreseeable future, I will be taking a pause to the build projects that I have been doing until I know what that next place looks like. I don't assume or I don't plan that I'm going to have a shop space. I probably will have maybe a garage space to continue, thus making it even more apropos to be called the everyday average Jonathan. But that's something that I'm giving to the man upstairs. If I'm blessed with that, that's wonderful. If it's not where God puts me, then I'll accept that as well. All of this is to say that for the foreseeable future, I will be taking a pause on the building projects that I have had for the past year. There will be at least 2 other projects that I'm going to publish on this channel, and I hope that you join me for those. I'm not exactly certain when they'll be coming out. It'll probably be another 2 weeks from now. But they're going to be a project like no other project you've seen on my channel. It's going to be quite the departure, and I won't hint at it any further, but I'm not saying it's going to be any good, but I'm going to try to make it good. And I think I will try to finish up 1 or 2 actual build projects that I have on my radar right now before I leave this mountain. But that said, this week we are going to be making something called a Quillon Dagger. And a Quillon Dagger, just think of it as almost a miniature sword. To me, they look like swords in miniature, and I like that style. It's something I've had in my mind's eye for quite some time. So without further ado, let's get to the shop and get started. And if you'll allow me, I'm going to do a quick montage of some of the highlights over the past year. It has been almost exactly a year since I started this YouTube channel. I've made exactly 65 projects. I'm not going to show all 65, but I will do a little bit of a montage of the ones that I have liked the most. Join me for that, and let's get to the shop and get started. So a Quillon Dagger, and I think that's how it's pronounced, is essentially just a distinctive dagger. It's characterized by what's called a quillon, which is the guard of this particular knife, and it's a very cross-shaped profile. It reminds me sort of a miniature sword. This dagger was really popular around the knights between the 12th and 17th century, and it's often double-edged for versatile use in combat. I wanted to make something that was almost a short sword, but again, looks like a sword in miniature. That was my idea in creating this. Unfortunately or fortunately, I am not a very good blacksmith, and there's no way that I could have drawn out a blade this length from a piece of just raw stock. So I chose something that was 5/8 inch in thickness and a piece of actually just mild steel. So again, there's several parts of this that are not very typical to a blade. This is not blade steel. This was going to be more of a set piece, sort of a movie prop, if you will. But it was also going to have several pieces that I have never done, things that I've never done before, like twisting angle iron, which you see me heating up here. I'm just getting it ready. And angle iron is that L-shaped section of iron. I've never twisted it, but I saw something on it. And as you can see here, it becomes this really ornate looking twisted thing. It's super cool. I can't believe I've never done it before. It's definitely something that I'm going to retain and use as I go forward. I don't think it's very structurally strong, but it has a really distinct kind of a unicorn-looking horn, unicorn horn look to it. It's also hollow once you twist angle iron like that, so you can put something down the middle of it. And this is one of the other areas. There's multiple areas that this piece sort of fails in terms of an actual weapon. One is the tang that I'm going to make for this. That's going to go through that handle is really, really small, and I was going to weld it on, which again structurally just is a terrible idea. So I really didn't think that through too well. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to make the guard and the pommel out of bronze. I'm going to cast the bronze myself. I have my own recipe, which is just sort of haphazard combination of copper, brass, lead, maybe a little bit of solder in there too. Get out the kiln, the old kiln here, and go ahead and put as much as I can leftover items into that, and away you go. As I've said in some of my other videos, that kiln takes a solid 30 minutes to get anything up to heat. It just has so much thermal mass compared to the forge and the kilns that I put in the forge. But here are the forms that I created for both the pommel and the guard. I really like how these turned out. It wasn't something I put a ton of thought into. The guard I actually put a lot of thought into. I helped with my brother, and I were working together to design that. But the pommel was just something that I thought just kind of fit the overall aesthetic. As you can see, I'm really not very dexterous with my pours into small form factors. The guard especially was going to be something pretty darn thin. Now I'm taking the abysmal tang that I've just sort of reverse engineered out of a piece of iron. I'm heating it up. I'm getting it, I wish I could say I was forge welding it, but I wasn't. It ended up actually being welded onto it. And then what I'll do is I will drop the guard, we'll drill a hole in the guard, drop it straight up that tang to the blade. Once I get it finished up, thread the pommel, and tap and thread the pommel, and then drop that hollow handle over. My recipe for bronze is, again, next to haphazard. It definitely has bronze, but it's just a weird combination of different measurements, different ingredients for them. So it usually is filled with pores. Have to do a lot of band-aid work to get those out. Here I am just tapping what's going to be the tang, and also putting threads on the tang, and then putting the pommel onto the base of the tang, as you see. Now it's basically done. I just have to go ahead and sharpen this. I have a knife sharpener that I use. It works really well. I am going to put my artist touch mark onto the pommel. Bronze is really, really easy for steel to put a dent into. And then the last piece is, because this tang is so light and so thin, I'm going to put some JB weld on there. The type of JB weld that actually has metal filings in it, so it sort of acts as structural at the same time. But look how that turned out. That handle is super interesting. And here you go. It is all together. It's pretty sharp. I wouldn't call it ridiculously sharp, but it feels great in the hand. The overall length is again, short sword-esque. It's kind of like Frodo's weapon in The Lord of the Rings called Sting. Just really feels good in the hand. And apparently, it feels good. And this is the balance point as well. Really nice balance point, right where I want it to. And apparently, it feels really good in a 7-year-old's hand as well. I stood back, let her swing it a little bit, hoped that she wasn't going to kill me and kill things around her or herself, and she didn't. And here it is. Here is the final product, final version. I really like how it turned out aesthetically. Structurally, that's another story. In general terms of application, no, it's not all that great. Very soft metal, but it does look the part, and it's definitely something that'll catch the eye. At least I think it does. Well, thank you for joining me for this build. I love how this turned out. I really get a kick of the look of this particular weapon, and really the look alone, because everything else about this is completely inauthentic and completely, maybe you could even say, unusable. So straight in. The things that I got right and the things that I enjoy. The profile, the design, this twisted angle iron handle, it is so cool looking. I really, really like the way it turned out. I like the way that the guard turned out. I like the way the pommel turned out. It all matches pretty well to what I wanted. The aesthetic of the blade is really good too. What I find interesting is that this is almost a short sword. I mean, it's actually pretty long, and it reminds me of Frodo's weapon called Sting in The Lord of the Rings. It feels really, really, really good in the hand. That said, there is plenty of this that makes this not an actually usable piece. First off, the tang, as you saw in the video, I welded this incredibly thin piece of metal to the blade to be the tang. First off, welding a piece of metal to another in a structural way for usage like that is not gonna work. It's gonna end up breaking. I promise you it's not gonna work as much as a monolithic piece of metal. If I just cut it from the same piece of metal, it would have been much better. So welding it on, not successful. The fact that that tang was so thin, and even if it was part of this, it would just bend, it would just break over time. It's not very structural whatsoever. So while I would say that might be a huge fail, it's not really a fail because I intended to do that all along. But what I wasn't thinking at the time, because I was thinking more about how to twist this angle iron, I'd never done it before. I was thinking of just slipping the angle iron over the top of the tang, welding it together, and it should be fine. It didn't turn out that way. Very, very, very. The other thing is, you saw, is that this is made out of mild steel, just straight stock iron bar or steel bar. I didn't even bother quenching it. It wouldn't have made any difference. There's probably next to zero carbon in this iron or in this steel. If you look really, really, really closely, the interface between this guard and the blade, you can actually see daylight. You can actually see daylight between it because it just doesn't fit quite snugly enough together. That said, it's a really, really cool set piece. I would use it as an accent piece. If you hit somebody with this, it would absolutely do damage like a sword would. If you went to combat with it and were hitting objects that were immovable, I'm 1000% certain it would break very quickly. But it looks really cool. It's gonna go on a wall somewhere. It's gonna hang up. It's going to be just that. It's just gonna be an accent piece. If you like projects like this, weapons like this, whimsical, fantastical creations like this, please check out my YouTube channel for other builds where I've made swords, weapons, armors, and other sort of novelties. As I said in my intro, I am selling this beautiful ranch. It has a buyer. We're in contract, so this will be one of my final projects for the foreseeable future. That does make me sad, but life moves on. I intend to probably pick building up again. Join me though in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to release some other projects that aren't necessarily build projects, but they're certainly creative. I'll be releasing those as well. Until then, God bless. Have a great week.